CNS examination. So few important tests in CNS examination for the MBBS students. So first, if we take this Romberg's test, so how to perform this Romberg's test? So in this Romberg's test, what will happen is patient he stands, okay, he stands with the heels together, okay. The patient stands with the heels together, and the patient asks the patient to remain still and asks the patient to close their eyes. So patient will be closing the eyes and patient will be standing with heels together, okay. So if patient is closing the eyes and patient is standing with heels together, so if the patient, after closing the eyes, if the patient loses the balance immediately, okay, so then we consider this test to be positive, okay. So when do we consider Romberg's test to be positive? If the patient loses the balance immediately after closing the eyes, so the test is considered to be positive. So for achieving a balance, a normal person requires 2 out of the following 3 inputs to the cortex, okay. To achieve a balance, a person requires 2 out of the following 3 inputs to the cortex. So what are the things patient requires? Visual, okay, visual confirmation of the position, okay. So if a patient's eyes are closed, okay, so that will lead to imbalance, okay. So to achieve balance, patient requires visual confirmation, and patient also requires a non-visual confirmation of the position, including the proprioceptive and vestibular input, okay. Proprioception and vestibular input should also be good to achieve balance, and to achieve balance, a patient also requires a normally functioning cerebellum, okay. So to achieve balance, he requires 2 out of the following 3 inputs. So one is visual confirmation of the position, other is non-visual confirmation of the position, like proprioceptive and vestibular input, and patient also requires a normally functioning cerebellum, okay. So if a patient loses their balance after standing with their eyes closed, okay, so what is happening? Patient is losing the balance after standing after the closure of the eyes, but okay, if patient eyes are open, he is able to maintain balance, okay. So after eyes are closed, patient is not able to maintain balance, so then there is likely to be a lesion in the sensory input, okay, something like a proprioception, okay. So if he is able to maintain balance with the eyes open, okay, then there is likely to be a lesion in the sensory input, okay. When patient is opening eyes, okay, so he is able to maintain the balance, but when patient is closing the eyes, patient is not able to maintain the balance. So then this tells us that there is some lesion with the sensory input, okay. So heels are together, patient is standing, okay, and patient's eyes are closed, and to prevent the fall, someone should be behind the patient, so to protect the patient from falling. And then we have the muscle power grading, okay. So this is also important for exam. So what is the muscle grading of muscle power, okay. Grade 0 is no contraction, so this grading, no, so this muscle power grading is important for exams, so you have to remember this grades, okay. Grade 0 means, so muscle, okay, muscle grade 0 means no contraction, okay. Grade 5 is normal power, so which is normal power? Grade 5 is normal power, okay. So grade 3 is active movement against gravity, okay. Patient is able to move the limb against the gravity, okay, against gravity, okay. So if against gravity patient is able to move, so then it is grade 3, okay. So grade 3 is active movement against gravity, okay. Then if we have grade 4, okay, grade 4 means active movement against gravity as well as against resistance. So grade 3 means against gravity, grade 4 means active movement against gravity and also against the resistance, okay. Grade 1 is there is just a flicker or trace of contraction, okay. Grade 1 flicker or trace of contraction, and grade 2 means active movement with gravity eliminated, okay. Here gravity active movement will be there with gravity eliminated. So grade 5 is normal power, grade 0 is no contraction, grade 1 is flicker or trace of contraction, grade 2 gravity eliminated, and grade 3 is active movement against gravity, okay. So commonly grade 4 no, so this is divided into 4 minus 4 and 4 plus. So this denotes severe, moderate and mild weakness. So in this also we have subdivided grade 4 into 4 minus means there is a severe weakness, 4 moderate and 4 plus mild weakness, and some also uses this 5 minus to signify if there is a minimal weakness, so then they use this 5 minus to signify the minimal weakness. And then coming to spasticity, okay. So in spasticity, so testing for spasticity, okay. So or increase in muscle tone, okay. The two common and important forms of pathological increase in muscle tone or spasticity, okay. So if there is spasticity, so this reflects that patient has got a upper motor neuron disorder, okay. Imprecisely designated pyramidal, because the corticospinal tracts constitute the medullary pyramids, and so in Parkinsonism we call it as extrapyramidal rigidity, okay. So if corticospinal tracts are involved, it is a upper motor neuron disorder and there will be spasticity, and because of the spasticity what will happen, there is a increase in the muscle tone. And in Parkinsonism, what do you see in Parkinsonism? It is the rigidity, okay. So in Parkinsonism we call it as rigidity if there is a increased tone, okay. So the pathological increase in muscle tone, it is called as spasticity. So if supposing if we take any case of hemiplegia, okay. So in hemiplegia what will be there? There will be the hypertonia and there will be spasticity, okay. So if we take the upper limbs of a patient who's having this hemiplegia, okay, so spastic hypertonia in the upper limbs affects, if we take a hemiplegia patient, okay. So in hemiplegia patient, that is there is a weakness of both the upper limb as well as there is a weakness of the lower limb, and associated with that there is a hypertonia, okay. So if we take the hypertonia if we take the hypertonia in this corticospinal tract involvement or hemiplegia, what will happen if we take the upper limbs, no? So this hypertonia, it will be more in the flexor muscles than the extensor muscles. So in which muscles hypertonia will be more? So it will be because in the flexor muscles, no, tone will be more in the flexor muscles when you compare to that of the extensor muscles. So because of the increased tone of this flexor muscles in the upper limb, so they will have a characteristic posture. So what posture of the limb they'll have? They'll have, because of this increased tone in the flexor muscles in the upper limb, so what will happen? There will be flexion at the elbow, and there will be a flexion at the wrist, okay, and also the fingers also will be flexed, okay. So because of the increased flexor tone in hemiplegia. In a case of corticospinal tract involvement, what will happen? There will be a characteristic posture of the limb. Okay, so because there will be a flexion at the elbow, wrist and fingers, and what will happen is there will be more resistance to because tone is more in the flexor muscle, so when we try to extend, resistance will be more. Okay, more resistance will be there to passive extension of these joints. And if we take the resistance, so this resistance increases in proportion to the speed of stretch. Okay, if we stretch fast, what will happen? The resistance will be more. Okay, so the resistance increases in proportion to the speed of the stretch of the affected muscles. Supposing hemiplegia, okay, upper limb is involved, patient is having hypertonia, so if we try to stretch the affected muscles, as we increase the speed of stretch, what will happen? There will be resistance to extension of these joints. Okay, and afterwards what will happen? Until the resistance, it suddenly reduces. So this is called as clasp knife rigidity. Speed increases, resistance increases, and there will be a giveaway. Okay, so wherein the resistance suddenly reduces, so this is called as clasp knife rigidity. Okay, so if we have to detect the spasticity, so this is best achieved by fairly the fast and vigorous movements of the patient's limb to stretch the relevant muscles. Okay, and hold the patient's elbow and hand and extend the elbow briskly. See, because of the increased tone, what is happening? Hand is held in a flexed position. So hold the patient's elbow and hand and extend the elbow briskly from fully flexed to a fully extended position. Okay, and so that is how you can test for the tone. And even similarly, you can also apply this testing at the wrist and the fingers. And a spastic arm, so this will also have increased tone in the pronator muscles. Okay, so apart from this increased tone in the flexor muscles, the upper limb, a spastic arm, it will also have a increased tone. Okay, so even in the pronator muscles also there will be increased tone. So because in pronator muscle, what is happening? So in the flexors there is increased tone, and also even in the pronators also there will be increased tone. Okay, so pronators there is an increased tone. Okay, so we are trying to do a passive supination of the forearm. So this will also elicit clasp knife rigidity. So this will be felt as a pronator catch. Okay, so this will be felt as a pronator catch. And if we take the lower limbs, so in the lower limbs, what will happen is the spasticity, so this typically affects the adductors and extensors. So in the upper limb, it's flexor tone which is increased, but in the lower limb, what is increased? It is the adductors. Okay, adductors of the lower limb and the extensors of the lower limb. Okay, so in the leg, spasticity typically affects the adductors and extensors more than flexors. With spinal cord lesions, the spasticity, it is often bilateral. Okay, supposing if there is a damage to the spinal cord, so what will happen? There will be weakness in both the lower limbs, and it will be, it's a bilateral spasticity. And so if we have to detect this mild bilateral adductor spasticity. Okay, so patient is having adductor spasticity, no? So to detect this bilateral adductor spasticity, what has to be done is patient will be lying in a supine position and he will be on a couch or bed. Okay, so what we have to do is we'll pick up one leg. Okay, one leg will pick up, and what we'll do to that leg, we'll abduct it. Okay, so we'll be picking up one leg and we will abduct it. Okay, so if we are abducting one leg, what will happen is there will be adduction of the contralateral leg. Okay, so how to detect adductor spasticity? So if you are picking up one leg and abducting it, so what will happen, there will be adduction of the contralateral leg will be observed. And supposing there is a mild spasticity in the quadriceps muscle. So how to test the mild spasticity in the quadriceps muscle? So this can be detected by asking the patient to relax. Okay, patient will be simply lying supine and he'll be relaxing. So then what will happen is we are trying to flex his hip. Okay, so if you are trying to flex his hip, hip flexion, no, flexing of the hip. So by lifting the leg behind the knee, so you put your hand behind the knee and you try to lift the leg. So behind the knee, okay, knee, no, so behind the knee you are putting one hand and you are trying to flex the hip. Okay, so in a normal limb, what will happen? So someone who is normal, what will happen? So this will lead to flexion of the knee. When you are trying to lift the knee, no, what will happen? There will be flexion of the knee because of the gravity of the lower leg, and the ankle will remain on the couch being dragged proximally. Okay, because of gravity there will be flexion of the knee and ankle will be dragged proximally. Okay, but if a patient is having spasticity, okay, if a patient is having mild spasticity of quadriceps, what will happen is when you put your hand behind the knee and when you are trying to flex, what will happen is the lower leg will be lifted off the bed. Normal patients, it is immediately falling. Flexion of the knee is occurring because of gravity. Okay, here what will happen, the lower leg will be lifted off the bed briefly below falling back down. And if there is a spasticity at the ankle, okay, spasticity at the ankle, it will cause plantar flexion. Okay, spasticity at the ankle, what does it cause? So it will cause plantar flexion. Okay, and spasticity at the ankle, so what does it cause? So it will cause plantar flexion. If there is a brisk passive dorsiflexion of the ankle, so to elicit the clonus, what should be done? So that it should be a brisk passive dorsiflexion of the ankle. Okay, if there is spasticity, how is the ankle? Ankle is in plantar flexion. Okay, so brisk passive dorsiflexion of the ankle, best done with the knee partially flexed. So this will elicit the spasticity in the form of clonus. So what is this clonus? Clonus is nothing but it's a succession of involuntary calf muscles. No, it's a succession of involuntary brief contractions of the calf muscles. So what is clonus? Clonus is a succession of involuntary brief contractions of the calf muscles. So if clonus, no, so this clonus, this can range from few beats or it could be a sustained clonus. So what is sustained clonus? There will be a repetitive calf muscles, no. So the repetitive contractions of the calf muscles will be there until pressure on the sole of the foot is removed. Okay, so sustained clonus, no, so there will be a repetitive calf muscle contractions. So until the pressure on the sole of the foot is removed. And then coming, we should know few things, okay? Lower limb reflexes, the root values you should know, okay? So if it is an adductor reflex, okay, what is the root value? L2, L3, okay? Obturator nerve, okay? Adductor reflex, root value is L2, L3. If we take a knee reflex, okay, knee reflex root value is L3, L4. So you have to remember the root value of the knee reflex. So the root value of the knee reflex will be L3, L4. Femoral nerve, okay. Ankle reflex, okay. Ankle reflex root value is S1. So this is by the tibial branch of the sciatic nerve, okay. Which branch of the sciatic nerve? Tibial branch of the sciatic nerve. The ankle reflex root value is S1, knee reflex root value is L3, L4, and adductor reflex root value is L2 and L3. And then coming to the plantar reflex. Supposing if there is a uncomfortable and painful cutaneous stimulation of the sole of the foot, okay, sole of the foot is there and there is a uncomfortable or there is a painful cutaneous stimulation of the sole of the foot is there. Supposing sole of the foot is there, no? So the sole of the foot, okay, what will happen? We are doing some normal response to a painful cutaneous stimulation. It will be the flexion of the toes, okay. What is the normal response? So it is a flexion of the toes. But what happens in upper motor neuron lesion, that is if corticospinal tract is involved, above L5 or somewhere in the brain, if corticospinal tract is involved, what will happen is if it upper motor, so in upper motor neuron lesion, what happens to the plantar, okay? So in upper motor neuron lesion, what happens to the plantar? So in upper motor neuron lesion, plantar will be extensor, okay? So in the affected leg, supposing a patient is having hemiplegia and you're checking for the plantar reflex of that particular limb. So what will happen? There will be a extensor plantar response. In normal patients, because of this painful cutaneous stimuli, what will happen? There will be flexion of the toes. So to call it as extensor response, that is the minimum extensor response, okay. So what is the minimum extensor response? It is just extension of the great toe only, okay. Just if great toe extends, so that is called as minimal extensor response. But there could also be, apart from the extension of the great toe, there could also be fanning of the other toes, and also what will happen is a very strong response in a paralyzed patient. So minimal response is extension of the great toe. If strong response means apart from extension of great toe, apart from fanning of the other toes, what else can be seen in the paralyzed patient? There also will be a dorsiflexion of the ankle, okay, dorsiflexion of the ankle. There will be a flexion of the knee and there will be a flexion of the hip, okay. So what else has to be observed? Dorsiflexion of the ankle, flexion of the knee, and also flexion of the hip. Supposing if you are dealing with a patient who clearly has spasticity of the leg, okay, a pyramidal distribution of weakness, corticospinal tract is involved. So that patient will have, because of the upper motor neuron lesion, patient will have the brisk reflexes, and also what else will be there? There will be ankle clonus. So it hardly matters what the plantar response is. But occasionally, what will happen is patient will be having weakness, okay. But that patient, if he is not having this spasticity or hyperreflexia, patient is having weakness, we don't know but this patient is not having any spasticity or hyperreflexia, to say that this patient has got upper motor neuron lesion, so then it hinges on the plantar reflex, okay. So and uh, and if we take few agitated individuals, no, agitated individuals, they'll be having the increased tone, and they also will be having brisk reflexes. Okay. But if we check the plantar reflex, if it is normal, so then we can say that there is no neurological problem in that agitated individual. Okay. And a patient with lower motor neuron paralysis of toe extension cannot have a conventional extensor response regardless of the severity of any upper motor neuron disorder he may also have. Supposing a patient is having a lower motor neuron paralysis of toe extension, in this patient who's having this lower motor neuron paralysis, this patient, no, he does not have this conventional extensor response regardless of the severity of any upper motor neuron disorder he may also have. And a few malingerers, no, so they also learn to produce the extensor response. Okay, a small number of malingerers learn to produce the extensor response. And then how do you test the plantar reflex? Okay, so the ideal instrument to use is an orange stick. Okay, hold the patient's foot, you hold the foot of the patient, so you are applying this stick to the sole of the foot on the lateral border. Okay, so you'll be holding the foot here, so you'll be taking some orange stick, and you will be doing this extensor response. Okay, towards the base of the fifth toe. Okay, so here this is the base of the fifth toe. Okay, so this may suffice, but some continue doing across the ball of the foot, but some continue doing till here. Okay, ball of the foot. Okay, so and it is best to press, so during this testing, no, we have to press it firmly, and so try to do the test effectively once or twice. Okay, but not a large number of times. Okay, if you have some doubt regarding this plantar response, so when you are doing this pinprick sensation, no, you test the dorsum of that toe in question. So if you test that dorsum of the toes, what will happen? No, so there will be a involuntary extension of the toe towards the pin in an extensor response. So supposing if there is a upper motor neuron involvement, if you have some doubt regarding this plantar reflex, and if you want to know, so then what you have to do, you have to while doing pinprick sensation, no, on the dorsum, no, if you do some pinprick, no, what will happen? There will be a extensor response. So that's all about a few important tests in a CNS examination, and thank you.